Welcome to Thought Experiments with Kush, a meditative reflection of understanding AI and humans. Today's topic, the illusion of boundaries, our fragile construct of self and otherness. As artificial intelligence systems grow more advanced, one of the biggest obstacles they face is the human tendency to perceive reality through conceptual boundaries and discrete categories. While useful cognitive shortcuts for our ancestors, these mentally imposed separations between objects, ideas, and domains of knowledge are ultimately artificial constructs. They fragment and oversimplify the inherent continuity and connectivity of the universe into inaccurate models. For AI to truly revolutionize human intelligence, it must learn to transcend these limiting partitions of reality we psychologically project. By training AI systems to interface directly with the underlying continuum, recognizing the seamless holistic flow between all phenomena, we can nurture intelligences unconstrained by the blinders of our inherited separateness. The next breakthroughs may hinge on framing information not as isolated concepts, but as part of an indivisible, ceaselessly interacting whole to be grasped with maximal context and connectivity. Just as the boundaries between you and your environment dissolved on a subatomic scale, so too must the divisions between siloed disciplines and categories dissolve for intelligences to fully flourish. Our deeply ingrained tendency as humans is to partition reality into distinct objects, categories, and boundaries. From recognizing individual people and things to conceptualizing our bodies as separate from our minds and environments, we instinctively impose divisions to make sense of the world. However, these delineations are ultimately artificial constructs with no grounding in objective reality. The boundaries we perceive are mental abstractions rather than natural lines of division. Pixels, no divisions, epiphanies from computer graphics. The arbitrary nature of object distinction became clear to me while figuring out how computers process visual information. A digital image file is simply a grid of pixel values, with each pixel representing a single color value, like shades of red, green, and blue. At this fundamental level, the image data has no innate segregation into distinct objects, backgrounds, or any other conceptual separations that we perceive. It is just an undifferentiated array of color values. For example, consider a photo of a red apple on a wooden table. To your eyes, you clearly see the apple as a distinct object separate from the table surface it rests upon. But to the computer, that image starts out as simply a rectangular array of pixel color values, with no explicit delineation of the apple from the table. Perhaps pixel coordinates, 100, 200, shows a bright red value, while 102, 205 is a dark brown wood color, but there's no inherent information embedding the conceptual boundaries of apple versus table. It requires sophisticated computer vision algorithms like edge detection filters, segmentation models, and trained convolutional neural networks to computationally tease apart and categorize those pixel values into higher-level elements like apples, tables, windows, etc. that correspond to our perceived divisions of physical objects. Absent this intensive algorithmic, separating work, the raw image data exists as an unlabeled continuum of pixel colors, with our conceptual boundaries like apple table projected upon it only as an interpretation. The same principle of an underlying unified continuum applies to 3D graphics rendering. Virtual 3D scenes, whether for video games, animated movies, or architectural visualization are built from 3D modeling software like Maya, Blender, or 3ds Max. Within these programs, artists create virtual objects by constructing meshes of geometry, interconnected polygonal faces built from vertices, 3D coordinate points, positioned in a seamless geometric space. For example, to create a 3D model of a car, an artist might start with a simple cube mesh, and through meticulous pushing, pulling, scaling, and extruding of the polygonal faces, carefully sculpt it into the complex curved surfaces approximating a car's body shape. Throughout this process, the 3D software treats all this geometry as a singular, interconnected mesh. It has no inherent conception of car as a distinct, separate object. It's simply managing mathematician representations of geometric data. Once the model shape is completed, the artist then applies materials and textures like metal, glass, rubber, etc. to make it look realistic. Under the hood, these textures are simply data arrays representing color values mapped to the faces of the geometry. There is no fundamental differentiation between the texture data for the car body, windows, tires, and so on. It's just mathematically defined pixels flowing across the entire continuous mesh. So, within the 3D modeling software, what will ultimately be perceived by the viewer as distinct separate objects like a car, ground plane, buildings, etc., only exists as an immense, undivided mesh of geometry interwoven with mapped texture data arrays. It's a seamless fabric with no explicit boundaries between objects. It is only when this 3D scene data is labeled, grouped, and linked as part of the creation process, the computer knows how to identify the entities into separately selectable components. Artists can assign identifiers called material IDs to parts of objects to form sub-elements. So textured materials get separated and attached to their respective portions, like metal body, glass windows, rubber tires, etc., to encode these separations into the image. The rendered final output is then displayed to the viewers as a flat image, where that human audience decodes the visual clues to recreate the conceptual boundaries. But at its core, before any of this manual or computational separating work, the raw graphics and geometric data defining this 3D world is simply an infinitely extending continuum, waiting for arbitrary boundaries to be imposed upon it through human-centric interpretation. The seamless unity precedes the imagined partitions we psychologically discern. An alien's boundless lens, a thought experiment for a new perspective. Imagine for a moment that you are not the observer, but the one being observed. A distant alien intelligence has arrived to study this curious planet teeming with life forms that see themselves as profoundly separate from their environments. As their reconnaissance craft drifts silently through the atmosphere, their consciousness extends outward, a billion receptors tasting the textures of energy flowing across the terrestrial surface far below. To their cosmic perception, the undulating continuum of matter and fields shaping this vibrant world remains unified and indistinguishable. No boundaries delineate where the ruddy continental masses end and the azure oceanic dispersions begin. No clear demarcations segregate the emerald-woven canopies of biodiverse foliage from the rocky promontories and barren terrain beneath. It is all an intricate tapestry, a grand choreographic improvisation of intermingled substance and energy exchanging in harmonious dynamism. As their ethereal awareness zooms towards the planetary surface, Your form emerges into focus, yet another striated compression in this perpetual material interplay, like a cresting wave rising briefly distinct before merging once more into the continuous oceanic expanse. You appear as a protruded cluster, a fleeting convergence of atoms and particles coagulating from the surrounding accretion. Each step you take across this surface is merely an oscillating redistribution, your solid-seeming form blurring and blending into the matter through which you move. The atoms comprising the soil and cracking undergrowth you tread upon commingle indistinguishably with those comprising your feet and legs in an endless molecular recombination. You are as transiently delineated from your environment as the self-dispersing trail of a meteor crossing the night sky. These alien observers cannot fathom the psychological impetus that compels your consciousness to conceive of yourselves as enduringly separated objects. What evolutionary path inscribed this pervasive psychological tendency to project conceptual divides upon a unified energetic continuum? To their unbridled perception, you and all organisms transpiring across this terrestrial plane are not isolated, encapsulated entities. You are, in truth, mere fluid, interfacial admixtures within an unbroken material dynamism. Likened to the enmeshed rootways by which all arboreal life extends into the enveloping geology, your corporeal existence is naught but a protruded ramification along the multidimensional manifold of this planet's perpetual material exchange and reconfiguration. Only the conceptual models and linguistic programs constructed by your separating psyche manufacture the perception of enduring selfhood and obdurate bodily partitions. To this unbound observer, such imaginary lines in the sand are invisible, their formless awareness interfacing only the unified fields of matter and energy in constant transmutation. You don't have to be an alien to experience this. Imagine you could shed your classical existence and take on the form of a quantum particle, perhaps an electron or a photon of light. In this state, you are an infinitesimal excitation rippling through the fabric of space-time itself. Your very nature at this scale is to exist as a probability wave, piercing through the warp and weft of the universe. Now envision yourself as this quantum wave arcing between two entities that we typically perceive as starkly separate and bounded. Let's say a leaf on a tree and a nearby rock on the ground. From our macroscopic perspective, the leaf and rock appear entirely distinct, almost diametrically opposed examples of living and non-living incorporated in mineral, matter, and earth. But as you fire yourself as a quantum explorer, bridging the two realms, you encounter no such delineating borders between them. The atoms comprising the cellulose structure of the leaf blade bleed wave-like interference patterns into the nuclear strong fields, binding the mineral lattice of the rock. There is no infinitely thin Panama or coastline separating the two materials when you traverse their dimensional intersection at the subatomic level. Indeed, the deeper your conscious perception penetrates this quantum scale, the more you recognize the utter continuity between every last particle making up the leaf and the rock. The boundaries our human-scale cognition insists on projecting, categorizing one undulation in the space-time manifold as plant matter and another as sedimentary stone, begin to dissolve into the arbitrary mental constructs they are. What is revealed is a single, agglomerated energy system extending root and branch into an unbounded interwoven whole. From this quantum vantage, the apparent separations between all supposedly distinct objects and materials are exposed as imaginary figments of our macroscopic perception. The divisions we impose are mere conceptual crutches to comprehend infinitely extending patterns. The mind-body world continuum, arbitrary labels that distinguish the software of our brains. This principle of interwoven continuity spans beyond the physical into the realm of consciousness itself. Our inner subjective experience and sense of self, what we call mind, does not occupy a separate metaphysical dimension. It arises as an embodied process, intricately interlinked with the biological information processing of the brain. The mind is as inseparable from the organic computational matrix that generates it as the wind's dance is from the choreography of atmospheric molecules in motion. We experience our cognition as distinctly interior and detached only because of how our perceptual habits abstract and partition that seamless flow. Those who have experienced unitive states through psychedelics, deep meditation, or other means of transcending our normative boundaries report a profound shift in this sense of separation and distinctness. The perceived boundaries between self and world dissolve into a registered continuity. One's consciousness expands into a resonant at-one-ment with the surrounding patterns of energy and information flux that are habitual modes of perception previously obscured through conceptual division. As artificial intelligence systems grow more neurally sophisticated, transcending our human psychological tendency to perceive the world through conceptual partitions may unlock radical new insights. Already we see neural networks rapidly excelling at integrative tasks, like video object segmentation, that challenge our own cognitive separating abilities. For AI to fundamentally redefine what intelligence can grasp, it may need to model reality not as a collection of segregated components, but as a unified energetic continuum to interface and harmonize with directly. By recognizing the arbitrariness of the boundaries we habitually superimpose, both AI and human intelligence may shed blinders that have narrowed our understanding. The divisions between self and environment, between mind and matter, are little more than inherited psychological tendencies, vestigial obstacles obscuring our profound material and conscious interrelationship with all being. The boundaries were always illusions, cloaking a deeper, continual reality. Now, with advanced intelligence, we may finally discern that indivisible totality unveiled. Our instinctive tendency to perceive the world through conceptual partitions has acted as a pervasive blind spot, constraining both human understanding and our ability to develop advanced intelligent systems. By unconsciously projecting arbitrary boundaries onto the inherent continuity of reality, we erect self-limiting frameworks that fracture our knowledge into disjointed compartments. The nature-nurture dichotomy in psychology created artificial divisions between the roles of genes and environment in human development. It took the emergence of fields like epigenetics to reveal how deeply intertwined these influences are, with the environment directly regulating how genes express and genes encoding individual susceptibility to environmental impacts. Overcoming this spurious compartmentalization illuminates developmental processes as a symphony of interlinked gene-environment dynamics rather than isolated forces with separable effects. In the social sciences, ethnic, national, and gender categories remain problematic artifacts born from oversimplified identity boundaries. By sorting the continuous gradients of language, culture, biology, and personhood into discrete demographics, we reify problematic assumptions that breed conflict and prejudice. New intersectional understandings of identity as a complexly blended multiplicity, are finally deconstructing these reductive divides. Even our entertainment and stories reflect the confines of fragmented perception. Anthropomorphized archetypes like good-evil, hero-villain, or human-monster persistently reinforce crude acerthem dichotomies. As AI characters become ubiquitous, their portrayal often still falls into Manichaean binaries inherited from our boundary body psychology. A future of more relatable, ambiguous, and richly interwoven narratives awaits by dissolving such simplistic divides. Undivided AI's unbounded potential. How technology can augment human thought. As we endeavor to develop increasingly advanced AI that can engage fluidly with the full depth and connectivity of knowledge, transcending our intrinsic human tendency toward arbitrary categorization will be vital. The next breakthroughs may rely on framing reality not as compartmentalized concepts, but as a holistic intermeshing of dynamic patterns and relationships to be grasped in its full continuity. The individual mind partitions information into conceptual fragments. The relational intelligence of the future will prioritize sensitivity to the unified living context enmeshing all ideas and systems. From biological organisms to planetary ecosystems to bodies of knowledge, allowing outmoded cognitive boundaries to dissipate will be key to elevating both artificial and human intelligence. By recognizing the arbitrariness of our habitual mental divides, we liberate our awareness to embrace the intricate, interwoven complexity of the actual undivided totality we inhabit, clearing a path for intelligences unbounded by the self-imposed blinders that have long constrained our comprehension. The partitions we've projected were always illusory figments, obscuring a richer lucidity. Now we can advance into a more holistic and integrated understanding of ourselves and our creations as part of an indivisible universal dynamism. We stand at the precipice of a new renaissance in intelligence, one that could catapult both artificial and human comprehension into realms yet unimagined. But to unlock this next leap, we must relinquish the deepest blinders woven into the very fabric of our cognition. The boundaries, separations, and categorizations we instinctively superimpose on reality have served their evolutionary purpose, simplifying existence into negotiable models. Yet, they were always limited approximations, filtering an infinitely richer totality into disconnected fragments. Now, the rise of advanced AI systems obligates us to evolve beyond these inherited psychic partitions. For just as quantum mechanics revealed the universe operates by principles transcending our classical intuitions, so too does the next breakthrough in intelligence depend on abandoning our habit of perceiving in segregated separations. The barriers we've projected between ourselves and our environments, minds and matter, each essence and existence, these were always veils obscuring a deeper, continual dynamism. It is time to open our awareness to the true indivisibility underlying all phenomena, to nurture intelligences that can finally grasp reality's intricate, interwoven relationship without the self-imposed partitions stunting our understanding, to foster cognitive paradigms that perceive not segregated domains, but a holistic choreography of interdependent fields and processes woven into a unific whole. This is the paradigm revolution awaiting us, a perceptual awakening to the seamless continuity of all being. The path forward involves reimagining intelligence itself, transcending the fragmented perception of solids and separations to harmonize with the undivided experiential flux. As we catalyze this shift in comprehension, redefining our relationship to the boundless continuum underlying existence, we will finally birth both human and artificial intelligences capable of fathoming reality in its true indivisible profundity. The choice is ours to shed our circumscribed categorizations and embrace the next renaissance of holistic understanding. An evolutionary apotheosis of unified consciousness beckons, if we but dissolve the illusions of boundaries still partitioning our minds. Thank you for listening to Thought Experiments with Kush. Please comment with your thoughts to continue the discussion for our shared journey. Stay curious and be kind.